Welcome back to Language Conventions. This video will focus on sentence expanding activities. Sentence expanding activities help students use and manipulate a growing number of words in sentences. They are especially useful for developing syntactic awareness for various grammatical and syntactic structures, such as subordinate clauses, prepositional phrases, and adverbial phrases. Using functional W questions is the easiest way to help students grow their sentences. The teacher first provides a simple subject for a sentence, preferably a simple subject related to something students are reading or content they are learning about. Next, the teacher asks a series of W questions to prompt students to expand and elaborate. In this example, a story that was used as a shared reading in class is being revisited in order to work on expanding sentences. The teacher can start with a who from the story. The teacher can then continue to ask functional questions like did what, why, which, when, and where to help students recall ideas and build an increasingly complex sentence with multiple ideas. Again, notice how there is little emphasis put on the names of the parts of the sentence. Instead, emphasis is placed on the kind of information we can add to expand our ideas. Expanding kernel sentences uses a popcorn metaphor. Think about kernel sentences as kernels of popcorn. One kernel of corn is very small, but when you add energy in the form of heat, the kernel blows up into a larger piece of popcorn. Likewise, a kernel sentence is small, with just the basic sentence elements, a noun and a verb. When students put energy into adding information, this kernel sentence also blows up. The kernel sentence begins with a who and a do. As students become comfortable with the functional concepts of who and do, we can begin to label these parts with their grammatical and syntactic labels. Namely, the who or what becomes the noun or the subject of the sentence, and the do or does what becomes the verb or predicate of the sentence. This expanding kernel sentences technique can be used to teach other functional components and eventually their grammatical and syntactic labels. Once students understand how sentences work, the labels help us to have a common language to talk about familiar ideas. As mentioned before, context matters. Bringing syntax work into curricular contexts being used in class will strengthen not only syntactic awareness and the ability to write good sentences, but will also reinforce concepts being learned in content areas. For example, while studying life systems in grade 3 science, an educator can prompt students to think about the various nouns that were being discussed in an article or video on plants. Then students can brainstorm the various actions or verbs that these subjects do. The educator or the students can pick one pair of words to start the kernel sentence. In order to expand the subject, teachers can prompt students to add articles like the, an, or as well as adjectives that indicate color, size, shape, number, or type. Educators can use the same kernel and ask students to expand the predicate by adding adverbs such as words that end in ly, and by adding phrases that answer the questions where, why, how, and when. They can consider things like time of day, weather, or location. As students become proficient in each of these separate skills, by having plenty of opportunities to first expand the subjects of sentences and then plenty of opportunities to expand the predicates of sentences, they can combine these skills to work on both at the same time. For some students, completing these kind of expanding activities can be difficult. Providing a visual scaffold in the form of a table can support students until they are comfortable with the structure. Remember, scaffolds of any kind are meant to be faded and removed. The goal is for students to learn the structures and then be able to apply them independently in their writing. To make this strategy more advanced, educators can focus on key concepts and work with a specific type of expansion for a specified amount of time before moving on to another concept. Some examples that demonstrate increasing complexity are compounding the subject and the predicates, adding a dependent clause to make a complex sentence, or combining two independent clauses into a compound sentence. Through the previous example, we hope you recognize the potential to use any topic or subject area to embed syntax work into. Here is an example of a kernel that a grade 6 student might work with while learning about biodiversity and climate change. Educators can prompt students to compound the subject. Is there a related example of climate change that you can use to compound the subject using the word and? What about compounding the predicate? Does climate change affect anything other than animals? Increasing the complexity even more, students can be prompted to add more information about both the subject and the predicate. In this case, an appositive phrase, two main examples of climate change, and an adjective, marine, that tells what kind of animals and plants. Using this expanding sentences strategy should begin with an emphasis on the function of the words in the sentence, starting with a who and a do, telling more about the who and telling more about how, when, and where the do was done. Expanding sentences has been traditionally done with worksheets with unrelated ideas and concepts, leading students to believe that these are simply activities that need to be completed. Instead, make connections for students by providing contextual examples that demonstrate for them how these activities will improve their thinking and writing, increasing the specificity of their oral and written communication of ideas. And finally, students should have many opportunities to practice simpler skills before adding on to more complex ones. Thank you to the staff and leadership team of the Waterloo Region District School Board for sharing their learning and resources for the development of this learning module. And thank you for watching and engaging in learning about sentence and syntax skills.